Welcome to Believing the Word with author and pastor Dan Shunk. This program is a ministry of Calvary Chapel Chambersburg in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Here's what's coming up in today's message.
That's what we're talking about, this corruption of Satan. Now, how did that happen? What was it that corrupted him? It's he himself. He himself. You go back and you read the account of Satan from Isaiah. You read Isaiah 14 and you read Satan's pride saying, I will ascend. I will become like the Most High. I will sit in heaven. It was of himself that he said, I will be like the Most High. I will replace God. You don't need God. You have me.
Have you ever been a little too confident in your own abilities or intellect only to be knocked down a peg or two, or perhaps completely plowed over? It can be humiliating and, in the worst case, devastating. Tyre was wealthy, powerful, and admired by the world, but its success led to arrogance and self-glory. Today in Ezekiel 27 and 28, Ezekiel compares the city to a magnificent ship that suddenly sinks, showing how quickly pride can destroy what seems unstoppable. The message is clear. When people trust in their power, wealth, or reputation more than God, destruction follows. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. God humbles the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Now here's Pastor Dan in the book of Ezekiel as he continues his message, The Downfall of Pride.
And they will draw their swords against the beauty of your wisdom and defile your splendor. They will bring you down to the pit, and you will die the death of those who are slain in the heart of the seas. Will you say then, I am a god? It's like the high school basketball player going to that college that's too big. Will you say you're a star now? Will you say then, I am a god in the presence of the one who kills you? Though you are a man and not a god, in the hands of those who slay you. Verse 10, you will die the death of the uncircumcised by the hands of strangers, for I have spoken it, declares Lord Yahweh. Notice, though, that the condemnation has nothing to do with his wealth. Did you notice that? He's a wealthy man. The condemnation, though, has nothing to do with having money in the bank. That is not a sin. The condemnation has nothing to do with being earthly smart in trade and economy. That is not the condemnation. The condemnation is that of pride, of putting yourself in a higher position than is rightfully yours. And then the question comes, where's your pride in the day that you're conquered? Where's your pride in the day that your position is gone? It's like that, have you seen some videos of like the high-ranking, government official that is pulled over by the cops? And in that environment, the cop has the authority, right? And, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, don't you know who I am? And the cop's like, I don't care. License and registration, proof of insurance, please. And they're like, you don't know who I am? Don't care. License, registration, proof of insurance. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter any longer. We need to live in light of the unseen reality that we proudly trust in the fact that we walk for God's glory and not for our own. And if we can live for that, that's sustainable. That can't be taken away. I'm living for God's glory. Try taking that away. How do you take that away? If you live for your own glory, that can be taken away. And so this prince of Tyre, this ruler of Tyre, brought down. There's so many other biblical stories this reminds me of, but just two that popped into my mind right now. You remember the story of King Agrippa in the book of Acts? And he's down at Caesarea Maritime on the coast at his palace. And the people are there giving him praise. And they're like, it's the voice of a God and not a man. And he's listening to this praise and he's not correcting them. And what happens? God has him eaten up by worms and he dies because of that. Because he accepted praise as if he was a God and not a man. He accepted it. He let it roll in. Even the angels will not accept that praise, right? You read the book of Revelation and you watch John, he's overwhelmed and he falls down and as if to worship at the feet of an angel or at the feet of one of the elders. And they're like, whoa, get up. I'm just a servant like you. Don't do that. They will not receive worship as if they're God. And Agrippa dies, and here's the king of Tyre being judged in the same way. What did Christ say? Here's the other one that popped into my mind. What did Christ say? He said, when you go into a room, don't even take a more excellent seat. Take the lower seat. Because then the only way to move is up. But you take the best seat in the house, the only place to go is down, right? It's just, a micro example of what he's talking about. Let's be sure to take our rightful place in this world. Those that are humbled will be exalted, but those that exalt themselves will be humbled. Make no mistake, it happens every time in small examples and here in a great big example. Well, now we have our third and final example of pride. It begins in verse 11 for the rest of the chapter. This now continues as it talks about Tyre to go deeper and deeper into the background of Tyre, into the spiritual behind the scenes look at what's happening in Tyre. We've seen the city of Tyre. We've seen the ruler of Tyre represented with the word ruler or prince. And now, if you just glance your eyes down to verse 12 real quick, and it says we're going to talk now about the what in verse 12? The king of Tyre. This, I believe, along with most other scholars, this is directly talking about the spiritual forces, the ones truly in charge behind the scenes in Tyre, which is Satan himself. This is one of two main passages in the Old Testament that give us deep insight into what happened with Satan in his background and his becoming who he is. There's more passages in the New Testament give us great detail, including Revelation chapter 12 or 13. I'm drawing a blank right now, one of those two chapters. But Isaiah 14 and right here in Ezekiel 28 is the other main passages that detail this out. So there is an intentional change here in verse 12, from verse 2 to verse 12, where instead of talking about the prince of Tyre, or it's the word Noged, which is talking about a ruler, to now here in verse 12, it's now talking about the Melech. Melech, that is king, right? So we're talking about Satan beginning here. So let's look at this section. This is easy to understand this section when you think about it this way. Pride will take you farther than you want to go. It will always take you farther than you want to go. And that's what we see here. So verse 11, again, the word of Yahweh came to me saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation over the Melech, the king of Tyre, and say to him, Thus saith Lord Yahweh, you had, past tense, the seal of perfection. The idea is you had all of it, or you were the pattern. Okay, sometimes in English we get caught up on this word perfection, and we think, oh, perfection, that only God is perfect. Now, the word is not very good in the English as perfect. The idea is you had the seal of having all of it. You had the seal of being seen as the pattern of what an angel was. That's the idea here. Continuing, you were full of wisdom and complete in beauty, or again, perfect in beauty. It's really better complete in beauty. Beginning of verse 13, you were in Eden, the garden of God. This makes it unavoidable that we are talking about Satan himself. You were in not just Eden, but you were in Eden, the garden of God. There was only 3, or let's say 4 entities in the garden of God: Adam, Eve, God, and Satan. And so this Satan, he was the sum of it all. He was the prototype, the pattern. He was seen as the complete one. He was the pattern of what angels should be. He was complete in wisdom and beauty. I mean, what a combination that is, right? And now let's get some details here about Satan. We'll continue in verse 13. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering: the ruby, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper. All of them. Yes, indeed, all of these. And the gold and the workmanship of your settings and sockets was in you. On the day that you were created, they were prepared. Verse 14, you were the anointed cherub that covers, and I placed you there. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked in the midst of the stones of fire. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until righteousness was found in you. Well, when was Satan created? It says here in the end of verse 13, on the day that you were created. That is the Hebrew word bara, which means created from nothing. This word bara is used in the 6 days of creation. It's not somebody rearranging material to make something new. A tree becomes lumber, becomes a house. No. Bara. This is nothing existed and something came into existence. Satan didn't exist and then God created him. In fact, it's interesting that not only does it say he was created, but then it said there in verse 14, I placed you there, showing God had authority over him, right? So when was he created? Well, let's go through that just for a second. When was Satan created? First of all, Genesis chapter 2, at the beginning of Genesis chapter 2, both chapters 1 and 2 detail out the 6 days of creation. The beginning of Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 through 3 says that God made all things in the heavens and the earth, all of it, the visible and the invisible, according to Romans, in 6 literal days, and then he ceased. And at the end of creating all things in the heavens and the earth in 6 literal days, he says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, what did he say? It was very good. At the end of each individual day, he said it is good. And at the end of creating it all, he said it is very good. How can God say it was very good if there was corruption or sin or evolution or anything else? How could he say it is very good at the end of it all? He couldn't. He couldn't. So far, our point is that within the 6 days of creation, Satan didn't fall. He's there. He was created within the 6 days of creation, but he hadn't fallen yet. You with me so far? Okay, so he fell after the 6 days of creation. Okay, well, when did Satan fall into corruption? There's actually 4 fallings of Satan. We're talking about his first fall, from beauty and wisdom and being complete in perfection to this fall into corruption. When did that happen? Well, the first time marker that we have in the Old Testament is when Adam's son Seth, it's actually his third son, isn't it? Cain, Abel, Seth. The first time marker we have is when Adam's son Seth was born. It tells us in Genesis chapter 5 that Seth was born 130 years after creation. That's what it tells us. So with Cain and Abel being born before that, that tells us that the fall of man, Adam and Eve eating the apple or whatever it was, this could have happened as late as 128 years into creation. They could have lived in a perfect environment for up to 128 years. Now, I'm along with most other people. I don't think it took nearly that long before they fell into sin. I think it probably happened in a very short period of time, maybe a number of weeks or months. I don't even think it took years. But there was a period of 128 years before before Cain, Abel, and Seth started to come along. So within that 128 years is when Satan himself would have fallen from his completeness into corruption. Does that make sense? We're going to get a little bit deeper into further fallings of Satan here in just a second. In fact, we'll read verse 16 and we'll kind of pick up on that a little bit. Yeah, because it says that there in verse 15. Just to recap that, it says, you were there in the day that you were created until unrighteousness or iniquity was found in you. So that's what we're talking about, this corruption of Satan. Now, how did that happen? What was it that corrupted him? It's he himself. He himself. You go back and you read the account of Satan from Isaiah. You read Isaiah 14. And you read Satan's pride of saying, I will ascend. I will become like the Most High. I will sit in heaven. That it was of himself that he said, I will be like the Most High. I will replace God. You don't need God. You have me. And so it comes from within him that this corruption and this unrighteousness happened. Now I continue in verse 16. By the abundance of your trade, you were internally filled with violence and you sinned. Therefore, I have cast you as profane from the mountain of God. And I have destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was lofty because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom by reason of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I put you before kings, that they may see you. Notice his fall is to the ground and before kings. We're going to get back to that. Verse 18. By the abundance of your iniquities, in the unrighteousness of your trade, you profaned your sanctuaries. Therefore, I have brought out fire from the midst of you. It has consumed you. I have turned you to ashes on the earth, in the eyes of all who see you. All who know you among the people are appalled at you. You have become terrified, and you will cease to be forever. So this continues to show further falling of Satan. Satan here is called twice. He's called the anointed cherub that covers. Anointed. What's anointed? Chosen. That's what that means. It means you're I picked you. Okay? Most scholars would say that he was picked to be the head angel. He was the chosen angel of the highest order. That's what a cherub is. There's cherubs, there's seraps, and other types of angels in heavenly hosts, and cherub are seen as the highest order. In fact, we see them in Ezekiel chapter 1, Ezekiel chapter 10, as being the ones that get to guard the very throne room of God. That's what these cherubs do. And so he lived in the presence of God until his first fall that we read about somewhere in the first 128 years of creation. In fact, we then see him in the days of Job. We see him still able to come into the presence of God, but he no longer abides there. He no longer lives there. He still has access to the presence of God, but he no longer lives there because he's fallen to the earth. And so we know he still has access to heaven, but it's not his home. But then there are further falls, because by the time the tribulation comes around, we read in Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, that shows his second fall. Because at that point, he's actually cast out of heaven, not to be welcomed back into heaven again. He's cast to the earth, down to the earth. And it says how he knows he has just a little time left. So at that time, during the tribulation, where God says, you're not welcome here in heaven even to visit any longer. He knows his time is short on the earth, and that's his second fall. And then actually we see another one. At the end of the tribulation, he takes a further descent from the earth, from heaven to the earth. That's bad enough. But then he goes from the earth to what? What happens to him at the end of the 7-year tribulation? He gets cast into the bottomless pit, into the abyss. That's even worse. Okay, now he's trapped there for 1,000 years. Oh, but don't worry, Satan. It gets worse, because when he gets out from there, his fourth and final fall is he gets out from there to deceive the nations for a short period of time again. And then he's going to be cast into the lake of fire forever and ever. And that is his fourth and final fall. You ever thought about that before? Satan actually fell 4 times altogether. That's his full descent. And so it's all pictured here. What a waste. What a waste of all of his ability, beauty, wisdom, all consumed upon self. I will be like the Most High. Whew. Man, what a shame. Now, we have a fourth one I want to do here. It finishes the chapter in these last verses, verse 20 through verse 26. It sort of switches gear again. It's going to actually mention Tyre's twin sister city, Sidon, right next door to them. Many cities, even in America, we still talk about them as twin cities, right? Minneapolis and St. Paul, you talk about them as twin cities. In Maine, where we were from, Bangor was a big hub, but Brewer was right next door. So we talked about Bangor, Brewer as the twin cities. Well, Tyre and Sidon were very much like that. And so we have a mention here about Sidon. But interesting enough, these few verses about Sidon aren't even really about Sidon. They're about Israel again. They're about Israel. And then we actually get a mention of Israel in verse 25 and verse 26. So our last note about pride here that I want to look at to wrap this up is this, that pride will make you unusable for the kingdom of God. Completely unusable. Notice how that comes out here, starting in verse 20. The word of Yahweh came to me saying, Son of man, set your face against Sidon and prophesy against her, and say, Thus saith Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against you, O Sidon, and I will be glorified in your midst. Then they will know that I am Yahweh, when I execute judgments in her. And I will manifest my holiness in her, for I will send pestilence to her, the blood to her streets, and the wounded will fall in her midst, by the sword upon her on every side. Then they will know that I am Yahweh. And in verse 24, and there will be no more for the house of Israel a prickling briar or a painful thorn from any round about them who scorned them. Then they will know that I am the Lord Yahweh. So this judgment on Sidon, it's righteous, but it will cause God's holiness and God's glory to shine forth. And did you notice that all of this is done for the loving care of God's own people, Israel? That's why this is done. He's the apple of their eye, and he specifically says, this is why I'm doing this, so that they will no longer be a prickling briar for the house of Israel. They will no longer cause pain to my people, Israel. That's why God's doing this. This section against Sidon here is a good reminder of that's why all of these foreign nations are listed here, because of their interactions with Israel and the pain that they cause to God's chosen people. And that's why they're listed here. And Sidon is just put aside, and they will be gone completely for what they did to Israel. They've become completely useless. And now finally, verse 25, Thus saith Lord Yahweh, When I gather the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they've been scattered, and I will manifest my holiness in them in the sight of the nations, then they will live in their land which I gave to my servant Jacob. They will live in it securely, and they will build houses and plant vineyards, and they will live securely when I execute judgments upon all who scorn them, all around them. Then they will know that I am Yahweh, their God. God desires a people that are looking more and more like him in humility, more and more every day. That's what he's looking for. This is a great reminder that the judgment of the nations, it's not so much to eradicate these peoples, so much it is to refine a people into holiness for God. Refine people into his own image and into holiness. That's what it's all about. He desires holiness, and that's what he mentions here, even about Israel in the end. And so if you don't want to go through the fire to be refined into holiness, you'll go through the fire and be burned up and become completely useless for the Lord. That's the only options the scripture gives. In our flesh, we would be burned up by God's judgment. But if we become born again, have a new heart, now that can withstand the fire and we'll come out on the other side. So challenge ourselves tonight. Have you noticed any signs of pride in our own lives, like we've seen here as epitomized? If we've seen these telltale signs of pride, we need to deal with it. Come to the Lord and tell him about it. Talk to him about it and deal with it. Get it behind us. And ask the Lord for the power of the Spirit to eradicate it and help us to live in a new way, not for the things of this earth, but for the things that would please him. So are any of these things true in our own lives? Have we become focused on maybe just things we're good at rather than things that God wants us to sink our teeth into? Think about it. Do we think that we're more than we actually are? Apart from Christ, we're nothing. With ourselves only, we're nothing. Sometimes we find that pride has taken us farther than we're willing to go. Has that happened? That's pride. And then finally, have you become unusable for the kingdom? There is an easy way back. If these things have been noticed in your life, I just want to read you Psalm 10, verse 4. If you want to go there with me, you can. Psalm 10. It's a great way to end this section. Psalm 10 says, The wicked in the haughtiness of his countenance does not seek God. All his thoughts are, there is no God. See, that's the solution that I'm looking for. The easy way back to God is think about God. Turn our hearts and our attention back to God. And that's something the haughty, the prideful won't do. But if we can humble ourselves, come to the Lord in prayer, and just say, Lord, I need you, that's the way back. I think sometimes we think the way back is so hard and so long, and Lord, you don't know all the things I've done. And the Lord would just say, the way back is just seek me. Just seek me. Just every day come to me in prayer and say, Lord, I need you. Lord, rid me of this pride, and He will do it every time. Amen.
You've been listening to Believing the Word, a ministry of author and pastor Dan Shunk at Calvary Chapel Chambersburg in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Pastor Dan has been teaching through a series in the book of Ezekiel. We'd love to get connected with you and hear about how God is working in your life through this teaching program. You can reach us by phone at 717-500-1102. Again, that number is 717-500-1102. You can also check us out at our website at ccchambersburg.org, where you can learn more about the ministry of Calvary Chapel Chambersburg and find our chapter-by-chapter messages. If you're in the Chambersburg area, we'd love to have you join us Sunday mornings and Thursday evenings on 5121 Coffee Avenue. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back with more from the book of Ezekiel. But until then, this has been Believing the Word with Pastor Dan Shunk.